Since I was a little boy, I always wanted to be a superhero. I mean, who didn't, right? And even though I grew older and realized that spider bites don't exactly give people superpowers, I didn't give up on my dream. And even if I couldn't get the super, I can still become a hero. There are many heroes in society, from doctors and nurses to engineers and scientists. The opportunities were endless. But as I was supposed to decide on a career, well, we needed heroes in the world more than
China
ever.
has identified the
effects
cause
of
of
climate
mysterious
change,
new
security.
virus.
These years highlighted one hero above all others, one that displays an extraordinary ability and shows up every day against all odds to selflessly care for countless lives, all to support not themselves, but an entire nation. Maybe I can become a superhero after all.
We really probably got started in 2017, and since then to now, we've freely distributed several thousand breadfruit trees. Lucky for us, through various types of networking, we've been able to spread breadfruit trees across this country. Beyond communities and efforts all around the country, we have also partnered with institutions. So we have a breadfruit forest established at the prison. We also gave 105 to the university for a fee. So in the longer term, from this specific exercise, we hope to introduce free food mass, especially to the most vulnerable among us, and we want to make that sustainable and most nutritious. And that could only start, of course, by looking at where we eat, how we use, and even how we waste our food, and having a sort of rethink of development policy and planning in agriculture.
A breath of love interchangeably, decreasingly.
But in every drought, no doubt, there is always a loading lush.
An effort, a teaching, a broader lesson, an influence. A breath of love interchangeably, increasingly, earthly concerns, urging considerations, environment, humans, environment, from one breath to another, love.
There is a hero that dwells in each of us.
Change is to trust that better stands with us.
Well, I think we owe it to the children of the world to listen to their cries for a better planet and for they to live in a safer world. Because a lot of young students from all over the world have lost confidence in many world leaders because they kept putting profit before planet and profit before people, and they left a trail of mess for the young people to clean up.
Your leaves fall beneath, creating soil fertility. Your ecosystem is unique for peace and harmony.
You said 300.
Nah, $1
Son, how's the fundraiser going?
Yeah, it's good. It's a little difficult, but I'll get through it.
You're not mixing matters at all, boy.
Your sister, she said she's very proud of you, all the work that you're doing. She said you're her hero.
Well, I guess in our own way, we all are.
Vision AI activated.
Daddy loves you.
Search now. Still searching. Arriving soon to destination. Search complete.
What happened next?
Could you believe the humans stopped using materials that were dangerous for the earth? They also started walking more and sharing their rolling metal cabins, and even found new ways to use the things that they didn't want. Then suddenly, the rain came. The earth had cooled down and its balance was restored. Happily, the fairies were now able to collect water to use and quickly attended to their crops and washed their clothes. Life was returning. And so when they had finished their chores and bathed in the rain, there was happiness in their souls because the humans were able to bring the water again.
Ma, you think it will come again?
Maybe one day.
Hi, it's Shelby from a group of artists, and today we'll be talking about upcycling and recycling in the art department. Upcycling is the process of transforming byproducts, waste materials, useless or unwanted products into new materials or products perceived to be of greater quality, such as artistic value or environmental value, while recycling is the process of collecting and processing materials that would otherwise be thrown away as trash or turn them into new products. So how do we utilize these processes in film? Using cardboard and empty cartons, etc. to upcycle and create props. To support upcycling and recycling is the concept of reusing. Use over the same equipment such as makeshift reflectors, light stands and gels to reduce the need for more material. So it's simple. Get creative, reuse the used, and use what you have.
Hi, I'm Simon from a group of artists, and today we will address nature in film. When we talk about respecting nature in filmmaking, we open up a topic about working with the space instead of working against it. Example, you need to keep it clean. Take all your garbage back with you. Do not cut the trees or break the branches off. Do not destroy the crops or nearby vegetations. In our film Lady Nature, all the scenes were filmed without changing any of the natural environment. Using the outdoors adds a certain raw, beautiful feel that can be aesthetically used easily. So we found an interesting space, Lopino River and Forest Park dumping sites, respecting the areas that may be banned from the public and requesting permission from the right authorities to use the space. In filmmaking, it can be very tedious, but you want to be able to practice good habits to keep the environment intact.
Hi, it's Shelby from Goa. We'll be talking about energy consumption. We use energy in all sorts of ways, on-set and off-set, from charging our cameras to plugging in our lights. The simplest way to reduce energy consumption is therefore more simple than you think. Utilize the natural environment to save energy intake by your equipment. How can nature replace our equipment? Not completely replace it, but assist greatly. Using the sunlight with diffusers and reflectors to support to give some well-lit shots and beautiful varying time of day tones. In this, you can also play with the temperatures and natural lighting provides. For example, a shoot at noon for bright, cheerful scene and one at sunset for a more reminiscent, grateful, even romantic scene. Different times, different feels and aesthetics. Now coming inside, you can switch off your fluorescent bulbs and lamps and replace it with LEDs and try minimal fixture lighting setups. Finally, don't be afraid to do further research.
Hi, it's Simone from a group of artists, and today we will talk about reducing your carbon footprint. In filmmaking, no matter the size, you leave a certain amount of emissions. In an eco-friendly production, you use the best practices to encourage sustainability. Example, carpooling if you are going to be looking for a location with someone other than yourself. You can meet and go in one vehicle. You can also make use of the public transportation or even use a nearby park or an area that fits your film well and therefore does not require too much movement. In one of our films, Planet Normal, we used one house and made it look like multiple spaces using different areas in the home to reflect a different feel. All in all, your main purpose is to be efficient and effective while being conscious of how you affect everything as a whole.
Good evening, beautiful people. This is the Green Screen Environmental Film Festival, the Caribbean region's only environmental film festival. We're really pleased to be here with you to actually have a really, really great discussion related to youth education and climate change. We're going to jump right in with two film shorts. That's right. So the first film short is actually going to be about our changing climate. It's a film short produced, I believe, by Sustain TNT, which is the organization behind Green Screen. And then we're going to jump right into another film short entitled The Nexus of COVID-19 and Human Mobility in the Context of Climate Change, right? From there, we are going to have the opening remarks for this panel delivered by Ms. Rueanna Haynes, a brilliant international climate change lawyer and negotiator who is actually at COP26 right now. So without any further ado, I want to welcome you and let's get started.
Our world changes constantly. Pay attention long enough and you will see the seasons change from dry to wet. The Earth's climate is also changing, but not always in ways that you can see. The average temperature of our Earth is getting warmer as we continue to put gases into the atmosphere that trap heat, mostly through the burning of fossil fuels. Cooking gas, heating gas, planes, trains, cars, factories, even lawnmowers operate on fossil fuels. Warmer temperatures are creating conditions for more powerful storms. Our Caribbean region has been experiencing more severe storms in the past 10 years. Hurricane Ivan in 2004 cost the Cayman Islands billions of dollars in damages and lost revenue. Higher temperatures also cause seawater to heat up slightly, and small temperature changes such as these in the sea can have devastating effects on marine life, especially our coral reefs. These changes are happening because the Earth's land, air, and water are all connected to its climate. So what can we do? Preserve wetlands that can store water and protect coastlines. Improve drainage systems. Avoid building homes in flood-prone areas. Avoid the overdevelopment of hillsides and the displacement of valuable soil-protecting tree cover. Take action.
Trapped between climate change and COVID-19, human immobility in the Eastern Caribbean. This video was produced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the interviews were recorded with the use of video conferencing software.
The Caribbean archipelago has been connected over the centuries by shared history of movement, from animals and fish that follow ancient migratory patterns on land, sea, and sky, to humans who, as part of the natural world, have always been moving throughout the islands. However, there are new challenges in the ability to move. Hurricanes and other natural disasters and events, such as contagious disease and pandemics.
With the support from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, through its global program, Human Mobility in the Context of Climate Change, the OECS Commission sought to explore the implications for human mobility in the event of a hurricane impacting OECS member states during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Caribbean region is defined in some ways by mobility of peoples, and it always has been since there have been people living in the islands of the region. People don't confine themselves to any one space or place or island. In order to survive, they've had to move around.
Essentially, what we have are small island states scattered along the archipelago. So when a disaster strikes, Essentially what happens is that one territory may be completely obliterated, and the people decide that they're going to move, even if for short periods. When we had the previous hurricanes, we did not have on top of this the restrictions which are imposed by a pandemic, as in the case of COVID.
The Eastern Caribbean region is currently faced with a dilemma. On the one hand, the region is struggling with the management of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has necessitated measures leading to limited human mobility. On the other hand, hurricanes might require people to move within their countries or across borders to cope with disasters.
When we think about the projections into the future, and as we see things at the moment, we're seeing a change in the strength of hurricanes that are occurring in the region. Things that were Category 2 and Category 3 are now strengthening more rapidly to become 4s and 5s, and we've seen that over the last few years. Another way in which climate affects us in the region is, of course, sea level rise. And by sea level rise, it's not simply just the 1 or 2 millimeters that we see, but in fact, what that adds to wave strengths that hit our coasts, that damage our natural buffers and our resources, such as mangroves.
My name is Cordelia Thomas from Coliho, Commonwealth of Dominica. Oh, I've been living in Coliho all my life. I was born and bred in Coliho. I was raised in Coliho. During Hurricane Maria, the river overflowed its banks and branched out into various areas on the left side of the village and the right side of the village. So that's a great concern. And currently, we have no walls to protect our community. If we would have another hurricane, the river would just overflow its banks again and do the same thing like it did for Maria and enter into the homes of people and cause destruction.
Climate change is probably one of the most pressing immediate issues in the Caribbean region. And it's particularly important because it means a dramatic and drastic change in how and where and when people can live in these island places and spaces.
In the example of Dominica, where Hurricane Maria devastated that small island state, there in the aftermath, we saw thousands or even tens of thousands of Dominicans having to flee the comfort and security of their homes to migrate to other neighboring islands because of the devastation of the hurricane. It really demonstrated how one single event, which is triggered by climate change, can lead to significant disruption in the lives of the people of the OECS.
During the hurricane, I was at my house. The house is now in ruins, that's where I was. So the only place we could stay at that point was at our uncle's, so that's where we slept and that's where we stayed temporarily. Until after that, not a few weeks after, we cleared up my sister's house, and then that is where we had been living, and that's where I am up till today.
I think the fact that they've made travel and trade easier within the OECS was definitely a great move. One of the amazing things, obviously, when Dominica was hit by Hurricane Maria, is that people were able to get out. There were other countries in the Caribbean that they were able to get out to without it being difficult or problematic. And at the same time, it also allowed skilled labor to come into Dominica to help rebuild.
So with the COVID pandemic, traveling, movement has been restricted because of the protocols and the obvious health risks. If we have a major event in the near future in this current COVID pandemic, there may very well be a triggering of the need for movement of persons because of the impact of a storm, a hurricane, winds. How do we respond to the need for movement? We need to ensure we have the right mechanisms and operating protocols to facilitate the need to safeguard against the threat of climate change. However, at the same time, safeguarding against the threat of the health risk.
When there's a hurricane alert, persons have to go in a hurricane shelter. You don't know who is infected with COVID. Bear in mind that it is highly contagious, as we all know. It's risky. It would just be really troublesome. And I pray that never happens.
We would have issues of additional pressure on health facilities and other quarantine and isolation facilities in the various islands. And these are all foreseeable challenges for the region as we look at both the pandemic and climate change. Climate change is a COVID-19 patient because you find that funds that had been set aside for dealing with climate change action, such as sea level rise, had to get diverted, for example, to other immediate needs regarding the pandemic.
OECS member states must embrace a coordinated approach and proper planning across all sectors and at all levels in seeking to make allowances for human mobility issues which may arise in the event of a hurricane occurring during the COVID-19 pandemic or a similar future incident.
We need to build on what we have. We need to find solutions that bring a greater level of coherence and collaboration and integration in what we're doing. We need solutions that allow us, if we need to migrate, if we need to move, that we can do so with dignity. And in this COVID-19 environment, we also need to be able to do so safely.
We need to ensure that we build resilience in our communities. So we need to ensure that we implement better building codes and better building practices to ensure that these homes and structures can withstand the impacts of climate change.
It is clear that now more than ever, Caribbean countries must work together to share a stronger, safer future.
My name is Rueanna Haynes and I'm speaking to you live from COP26. It's such a pleasure to be with you all, even if virtually, for the 11th annual Green Screen Environmental Festival. So a little bit about myself. I've been involved with international climate change negotiations for the past 11 years or so. And during this time, I've played a number of different roles as a negotiator for the Alliance of Small Island States. My current role is as the lead negotiator on transparency issues for AOSIS. So a bit about this COP and what it's about and why it's important. As you would have heard, this COP is setting up to be an extremely pivotal one. It's probably even the most politically significant climate conference that we've had since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015. We're meeting at such a critical time as well. I mean, the entire world is still sort of reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic. Climate change impacts are ramping up, triggering extremely dangerous and deadly extreme weather events all over the globe. We're also feeling them at home in Trinidad and Tobago in the wider Caribbean. And at this time, what we also have is extreme clarity from the science. So the science of climate change is so very clear, clearer than it has ever been, that climate change is unequivocally man-made, that the impacts are already being felt and that they're widespread. So climate change is here, and that we actually still have time to try to do something about it, although it's an increasingly shrinking amount of time. So in terms of the Caribbean and our priorities for the COP, what are we looking for? At this COP, it's critically important that we send a signal to the world as governments that we will do what it takes to be able to stay within the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in average global warming, global temperature rise. And this is an overarching priority. You may have heard about the 1.5 to Stay Alive campaign led by small island developing states globally, also picked up in the Caribbean. This remains a key objective. Secondly, we're asking for solidarity from the international community. And what does that mean? It means that we need to have more access to better finance. So not just any type of climate finance. We need to have the barriers to access removed, and we need to have access to finance that is concessional. At present, Caribbean governments, other small island developing states governments are borrowing their way to resilience, or trying to borrow their way to resilience, and this is absolutely unsustainable. Again, on the theme of resilience, we're also asking for more progress on this issue of loss and damage. As climate change impacts increase, so too will the loss and damage that we experience as people living in very vulnerable countries and vulnerable societies. This issue has been extremely contentious at the global level, and we're asking at this point in time for us to make a real, genuine step forward in addressing this issue at its core. Finally, there is some unfinished business that we have to do in relation to Paris Agreement implementation. We're setting up a carbon market. We're putting the final nuts and bolts in place in terms of transparency and reporting, and we need to make sure that this is done to the highest standards of both mitigation ambition, but also environmental integrity, as well as transparency. So those are more or less, in a very simplified way, some of the key issues that are going to be discussed at this coming conference. I hope you all enjoy the festival, and I'm going to hand you over right now to the panel for the panel discussion. Thank you.
We all want to thank Rueanna for that splendid synopsis of what's taking place in Glasgow right now. Allow me to introduce, therefore, the panel, but before I do so, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Caron Niles. I'm a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. My research actually deals with the link between cultural industries and environmental impacts, and whether or not we can, as small islands, use cultural industries to pave a way to low carbon or zero carbon growth, based growth, or rather we should say carbon neutral based growth, whether or not cultural industries can serve as that base. In that regard, I also work with a local band through the company called Court Green Limited. I work with a band that's based in Trinidad and Tobago called Freetown Collective Limited. Freetown Collective, actually, I should just say. Freetown Collective Limited is the name of the company, but Freetown Collective is the name of the band. Hence the reason for the logo behind me. So for those of you who are wondering, why is there the word Freetown behind them? It's actually the name of a music band that some of you all may know. So that's me, essentially. So I manage a band, and I do research on climate change, and I teach a course at the University of West Indies that looks at climate change policy and climate change law every year. If you're interested in more on that, please feel free to send me an email. I'll share my details later. But enough about me. Let me introduce you to our most esteemed panel. I'm going to start off with Michael Lees, who is a Dominican filmmaker and photographer, and his work really explores the themes of environmentalism, spirituality, and island life, and he aims to connect the dots to the bigger picture. Michael attended UNC Chapel Hill, and he spent the first year of his career, the first half of his college career, actually focused on business, and then switched from business to film. What a glorious switch. Talk more about that later as well, as we relate to climate change. He actually embarked on a project called Uncivilized, which actually led him into the forests of Dominica, where he would eventually face, get this, Hurricane Maria alone in the forest in a palm leaf and bamboo hut, right? So he has written and shot projects from Billboard to UNICEF And so much of his inspiration is actually drawn from his home island of Dominica. I'm really looking forward to talking to you later, Michael. Thank you for joining us. We also have with us Marie Edith. You're gonna have to forgive me if I got your surname wrong, but as a matter of fact, I'm just gonna say we have with us Marie Edith Vincent. Vincent. Okay, I was nearly there, but I don't speak French. But yeah, it was really, really bad. But yeah, so you hear from the French Caribbean island of Guadeloupe, and you're the biodiversity project manager in a municipality risk manager and a risk. Sorry, let me say that again. You're a biodiversity project manager in a municipality and also a risk management lecturer at the University of the Antilles. You're also a youth ambassador, which that definitely is something that I think I'm very passionate about as well. And you're a 2021 Island Innovation Ambassador. I think one of the things that I really want to point out to the viewers that you also included in your bio to us was the fact that you grew up in a family of farmers, and that made you more interested in the impacts on agriculture. I am hoping to dig a little bit more into that today, definitely, to kind of talk about how climate change as a phenomenon is really impacting agriculture in islands as well. I think that's going to be a very important part of our conversation today. Let me also introduce to everyone here, Dezan, who is a communications and outreach manager at Climate Tracker. So Dezan Billy is a communications and marketing specialist who enjoys applying her knowledge and practical experience to the environmental and climate change movement. You hold an MSc degree in global studies, which I'm going to give 2 thumbs up for, and she would know why I'm giving 2 thumbs up for that. There's a bit of bias in there, as you would find out during the conversation. And her thesis was really focused on the effectiveness in global environmental governance as relates to biodiversity. And so currently, Dezan is the communications and outreach manager for the global youth-led journalism network known as Climate Tracker. Dezan, thank you so much for being here with us. We know you're also the former president of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network in Trinidad and Tobago. So I really want to point that out as well. We are going to be talking about youth today a lot, but I think these different perspectives are going to really enrich the conversation. And so the other thing I wanted to do is bring to the fore our last guest, our last panelist, Dr. Ronald Rueanna is a lecturer and researcher in disaster risk resilience at the University of West Indies. He's an early career researcher and academic with a thorough background in disaster risk resilience and sustainable land and water resource management. Currently, he's a lecturer in the Faculty of Food and Agriculture in the University of West Indies in St. Augustine, and he's responsible for teaching courses and for developing courses related to agri-environmental disaster risk and climate resilience. Immediately, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're making the links between what we're going to talk about with Ronald and Marie. I think there's a lot of synergy there to actually to dive into that conversation a bit more. But he's also an international consultant for a number of UN agencies. Welcome, Ronald, to the conversation as well. So, of course, to all the panelists, I just remind you to unmute your mics. It just seems that in this COVID environment, that's one thing I've become an expert at telling people, your mic is muted, your mic is muted, your mic. It's been one of those things of COVID, learning to read mouths when people are talking to you and you can't hear them. But let me start with the fascinating story that was in Michael's bio, because you lived through a climate impact. And this is in part what this is about. It's not just that climate change is real, it's that climate change is here. So why don't you share with our viewers today what that was like and how you felt through the entire experience?
Yeah, definitely. So I was actually making my documentary Uncivilized during the course of this. And the whole point of going and being in the forest was to see if I could find essentially a more harmonious existence, both internally and externally, in terms of how much we're extracting from the world. And halfway through doing all of this, Hurricane Maria, which turned into a Category 5 overnight, just decimated Dominica. And I was in the forest towards the East Coast, Rosalie area, in a bamboo and palm leaf hut. That day, someone had warned me that, you know, something was coming. So what I did, it was only a Category 1 or something at the time. I patted down my thing with palm leaves, like coconut fronds, to give it a little extra weight, and sat and waited. And gradually throughout the night, it just got more and more intense, obviously to the point where I started to very much question my decision to stay out there. But overall, the way I would describe the experience, at least the one thing is the forest serves as a windbreak. So where other people tell me they were getting pummeled 24/7, for me, I actually had, I guess, some protection. But every so often, a huge gust of wind would come through, and I'd shine my little light out, and I'd see the vines hanging like this. And if that stayed for more than a couple of seconds, I'd just start hearing crack, 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 as trees coming down. And eventually, one of these trees that I had been watching for, the tree fell, the trunk missed, and the branch took my shelter down and kind of compacted it to the ground. And that's where I spent the rest of the night, which I think in many ways probably saved me.
That is remarkable. That is simply remarkable. Well, we are happy that you're here to speak about it and to share that experience, because I think when I visit communities after a climate impact, what I hear about from persons who've lived through it is just the kind of awe in terms of they didn't even realize just how powerful these forces that we're talking about actually are. And I think on the let me just make a quick plug for this. I think definitely what it's made me realize is the need to pay attention to mental health after climate change impacts, because I realize that some persons become afraid of just rain after a climate change impact. You know, when it rains, they become very afraid. And so what you've done here and the ability to kind of take all these experiences while paying attention to your own mental health and kind of bring this issue to the fore, I think is really courageous, and I'm definitely applauding you for that. I wanna, however, take that conversation about climate change impact, and I want us to really talk about how it impacts our lives, right? First, we're going to talk about its impacts on the livelihood of agricultural workers, i.e. farmers. Then we're going to talk specifically about its impact on youth and what we should actually be talking about and how we can engage young people in this. One of the reasons why I think it's so important to talk about agriculture is because it directly impacts how we live, what we eat, you know, and where our food comes from. It also impacts employment directly. And so, Maria, I'm going to start with you. Like, what do you want people to know about climate change and agriculture as it relates to the Caribbean? And run out after Maria, I'm going to come to you. But Maria, let's start with you. What do you want people to know?
So maybe more specifically about Guadeloupe. So Guadeloupe is not an independent country. So we belong to France. We are French, considered as a French region. And in France, they really focused on climate mitigation and the impact of agriculture, the role of agriculture in climate change. Whereas in Guadeloupe, we are not really modernized. Our agriculture is not as modernized as the other French regions. So we should more focus on climate change adaptation in agriculture, and this is a huge issue for us. So after Hurricane Maria, for example, we were mostly imported plantains from Dominica and from St. Lucia. while the restriction, the ex-colonies status that we have really is making difficult those links, the trade with the other Caribbean, as our taxes are more important. So it's really, people are more and more aware of the impact of climate change on agriculture, and the fact that we should focus on our local response to these issues. So this is my view from Guadeloupe. At the beginning, we were really expecting a lot from the European Union, and little by little, people start to realize that after the most intense and regular events, the response is not as specific that it should be.
Wow, that's really significant. Let me bring Ronald, you on this issue as well, as it relates to climate change adaptation in the Caribbean as it relates to agriculture.
Thanks, Karen. I think the issue that we have to highlight first and foremost is that the problems with agriculture stems far beyond climate change. One of the biggest issues is the fact that we have, colonial hegemony, the fact that people think agriculture is something that you just do, it's not something that is economically viable, etc. And with climate change, it has worsened the impacts because, it has made it more difficult to become an economically viable entity. And the reality is that all Caribbean countries, most of us import about over 60% of our food. We do not eat what we produce. Trinidad, for instance, is over, I think, 80% is imported, right? So all the stuff that we produce is, very small in terms of amount, and we do not necessarily gain any revenue from it. And I think what we need to do is to try to monetize our resources. Recently, I heard that we were trying to, across the Caribbean, Trinidad as well, that they were trying to cultivate temperate fruits like strawberries, etc. And while that may sound good in theory, I think it's a horrible idea, right? Particularly because it is taking away what we are trying to do from the agricultural side, which is to promote our local production. Yeah, so my view on this entire thing is climate change has impact. Yes, we understand that there are certain impacts, and we have to look beyond climate change. In my mind, climate variability, just because you hear people talking about climate change and hurricanes and floods and drought, etc. But disasters could be totally insidious in the sense that normal, conventional rain leads to extreme flooding in many of our islands. That has nothing to do with a tropical storm or anything like that. Conventional rain that falls on a daily basis. And these are the things that need to be addressed. And I will say that primarily because we talk about preparations for climate change, but we're not even prepared for climate presence.
Wow. Wow. So a couple of things. I want us to dig into this just a little bit more to kind of put out some of the analysis, some of the richer points from in there, some of the things that might be hidden even to the audience. We need to talk, therefore, about the narrative, the overall narrative as it relates to climate change and agriculture. What should we be saying to our young people? Design, I'm going to come to you shortly on that topic of what should we be saying to our young people, particularly as it relates to climate change, but also more specifically as it relates to climate change and agriculture, because what Marie said is really critical. There is an overarching message in the EU that agriculture is driving climate impacts, that mitigation is important. And that might be correct in the EU, but I had one person from the same faculty that Ronald is in say to me, Karen, many farms in the Caribbean are actually already carbon neutral. In this region, we need to focus on adaptation. And that's not something that is communicated in our narrative. And that's because, to some extent, we are not even in control of the narrative in the Caribbean. And so, Marie or Ronald, I don't know if either of you have something to say on that front before I hand it over to Design. But the question is, Marie raised this point from the get-go, the perception of agriculture from people since on the outside, which Ronald spoke about as well, is different from the reality and the ground in terms of what we believe we need to be focusing on. Do either of you have anything to say about that before I hand it over to Design?
I could go and then Marie could follow maybe. I have a very strange, well, not strange, but out of the box view on this whole thing. We, in the Caribbean, we are considered to be the second most vulnerable region in the world, right? And we are constantly being told that you need to do this, you need to do that. But if we think about this whole aspect of climate change and our contribution to the overall, amount of greenhouse gases, etc., into the environment, it's minimal. But yet we are being told by developed countries who would have literally, maybe I should find a better way to say this. They have monetized environmental resources from before, from a long time ago. They were only able to get to the point that they are now by raping the planet, more or less. And in doing so, they are now coming to tell these small and developing states that we need to do A, B, C, D, when our contribution is like less than 5%, if so much, combined. And that I have a problem with, because you are telling us that we need to do all these things when the major causes are coming from you guys. And the reality is that if these persons, like you see how they have this global reduction by 1.5%, I do not think it should be a generalized thing across the region. What I think is certain countries, based on their contribution, it should be relative. It shouldn't be a generalized thing. So biggest contributors, they are the ones who should be looking at, minimizing their GHG emissions.
Excellent.
That's my view on that.
Excellent. And Marie, you want to add anything before I hand over to Dezan?
Yes, maybe to underline youth engagement. So what I can tell them is that the new generation of farmers, we are lucky. We have a lot of training, like online training, and possibility to learn how to do smart agriculture. So really we should start even by our little garden, in Guadeloupe. I think in Dominica, Martinique, French Guiana, we have what we call Creole garden. In those little Creole gardens, it's a garden that is near to the house and that have medicinal, like plant that cures, like heals us, and also plant that we can eat. So in those Creole gardens, we can already start by this to practice smart agriculture. Try to plant more what we can eat, because it's true that in Guadeloupe, for example, we are mostly planting sugarcane, as if we were still the granary, the storehouse of France, trying to provide them. So we need to work for ourselves and to provide ourselves. So it's really important. New generation of farmers. We have in Guadeloupe a high school specialized on agriculture that welcomes more and more students, and really need to include that in the curriculum. And after, I think we will talk more generally about the youth engagement for climate action, and even not specifically only on agriculture.
Yeah, exactly. So interestingly, I don't know how many people from around the region actually knew that there was a high school specialized in agriculture in Guadeloupe. But Ronald actually spoke about, he alluded to rather this idea of common but differentiated responsibilities, which is the way that the text of international climate change law addresses this idea that some have contributed to this system more than others, and therefore they bear more of the responsibility to deal with it. But to go to Dezan now, that question that I was asking, what should we be saying to youth about this in the whole, and then what should we be saying, before we move off of agriculture, I'll give you the final word on it. What should we be saying to our youth about climate change on the whole? But then what should we be saying to them about climate change and agriculture and what they eat and that kind of stuff?
Well, Karen, first of all, I think it's the first probably rephrase that question, and I think it's important for us to ask the youth what they have to say in the first place.
Sure.
Right? And the thing is that as we continue to experience the impacts of climate change, right, in many forms, from whether it's drastic coastal erosion or more frequent and intense storms and hurricanes, we're concurrently witnessing economic instabilities, right? And it's really putting a lot of pressure on young people, right? Asking the question of how are we going to survive? How are we going to, what will our futures look like? And we find ourselves in the Caribbean, right? In a place where we have to try to balance these things, balance our development with balancing sustainability and everything that's going on, and still achieve some sense of growth, some sense of sustainability, some sense of inclusion, right? And the fact is that there is a need for evidence-based policies, right, that are underpinned by rigorous, relevant Caribbean scientific research, right? That the need for that, I think, has never been greater. And I think that that's where young people need to really be empowered to get involved in. That's something that they need to be empowered to engage with, right? And the thing is as well that there is that in the Caribbean, I feel as though that there is an awful habit that we have, not to just take research that's done and kind of put it on a shelf, or like just take research that's done and just like put it in the library somewhere, never again to see the light of day, right? And it's like my grandmother always says, that not making any sense, right? I think that climate policies in the Caribbean definitely need to reflect the Caribbean science, and Caribbean reality, what's going on here, right? And I think that there's a big role for young people within that space. Young people need to really be able to align themselves with that level of decision making, that level of inclusivity, right, in shaping the Caribbean future and shaping the Caribbean policies with regards to us being at such a critical juncture, I think, in our development. And so, like you mentioned, what role or what, so some level you mentioned, what role does communication have to play with this, right? And how do we get that message out there about what young people have to say about what's going on with the Caribbean reality? And I think that definitely that's where, young people have such a wide variety of communication strategies and communication tools at their fingertips. And I think that young people just need to be empowered and given the chance to, and not just given the chance, but I feel as though young people need to take the chances, take the opportunities to get, the messages, the Caribbean messages out there. So that when people read about climate change, when people, hear about climate change, it's not always just the polar bears. The polar bears. And yes, polar bears are cute, right? And they're dying. But what about the Caribbean reality? What is happening here? What are the visuals coming from the Caribbean? And I feel as though like that is a big space for young people to get involved in.
Excellent. I think on that note, it kind of brings us full circle, because Michael actually began this conversation talking about him in a kind of grass structure, but as a filmmaker, and the question that we're now focusing on is one of, for want of a better term, getting or taking control of the narrative and really telling young people, listen, you don't have to ask for permission. Like, you can get involved and you can actually exercise your agency and take control of the narrative for yourself as a Caribbean citizen and have a voice on this very important issue that will shape your lives, right? I mean, definitely, I don't know how much you want to focus on the issue of science communication per se, but I mean, even beyond science communication, it's just communicating how this makes you feel, communicating what you think, and what do you think, therefore, Michael, the role of, your role as a filmmaker is in all of this, in terms of communicating the feelings of Caribbean people, about climate change, and also how do you think, how can other young people get involved, and how can we help other young persons get involved in communicating how they feel, not just with cell phones if they want. I mean, they can use a cell phone, but maybe they can pick up a camera as well.
So there's a couple of questions in there. I'm gonna try and get to all of them. I guess for me, like, having moved between Dominica and the States, it was like, there was always the question of how do we develop in a way where we retain our integrity and all the great things we have about our country, while also trying to get the things we want. And oftentimes it seemed like the models that were being used were like the United States or the UK. And I think what I did in Uncivilized and some of the previous work I've done is really asking the question of what does a sustainable country and solution look like? And I think at this point, it's very clear that those models that we have are not the answers. And so I guess for me, it's trying to communicate that to people, to let a lot of people realize, I guess in some ways, the gold, a lot of the intangible assets and tangible that we have here, that we need to not throw away in pursuit of things that glitter but aren't really gold. In terms of empowering people to tell their stories, it's a good question. I mean, I'd say one great thing right now is there are so many more resources available online if you want to teach yourself stuff than ever before, whether it's the Academy of YouTube, whether it's things like Udemy and Linda, and then also filmmaking equipment, while still not cheap, is pretty much cheaper than it ever has been before. So I think on the one hand, I would just encourage any person that is interested in doing these things to go start doing whatever they can and finding the resources available, because there is so much out there. And then on the other hand, I think it would be great to see more, I guess, like programs and institutions that support developing these sorts of skills and passions in the youth.
You know, when you said that, it just reminded me, the lead singer of Freedom Collective, Mohammed Marker, once we were at an event and he said, like, the job of the historian is to tell me what happened. And the job of the scientist, as far as he's concerned, is to tell us how it happened and how everything came together, and to begin to provide this explanation of, you know, how it happened. He said the job of the artist is to tell us, you know, how people felt, you know, when, and I think that's really, really important right now in our own history. And in terms of our own stories, Dizan made a point of research sitting on shelves. Not all research is sitting on shelves, right? A lot of Western research is not on shelves. Our Caribbean research is on shelves. That's to be, as a Caribbean researcher, I can tell you, you know, it's kind of disheartening, but when you search for research on the internet, Google Scholar often doesn't pick up regional research, you know? So the research that you get access to is a lot of Western research, and that kind of shapes your idea of the nature of the problem, which in itself for us is problematic. You understand? And so I think this events like this, where academics can come and engage directly with the audience. And by the way, for members of the audience, please feel free to continue putting your questions, your comments into the chat, and definitely will come to them. But I definitely think that this, in terms of talking about our own experience and talking about our own feelings, I think that's really taking that a platform. And Marie, let me bring you in here in terms of talking about how we feel about this and how you feel about it.
Yes, so I don't know if you have heard about what we call eco-anxiety. So in island states, eco-anxiety felt by the youth are more, as we are more impacted by climate change, we are more developing this eco-anxiety. So the American Psychological Association defines eco-anxiety as something, I think they say, chronic fear of environmental disaster. And it's not a mental illness, but rather a rational response to deep uncertainty that we feel. And you know, we are overwhelmed by information about no future, no other planet, no need to study this or that because it will be too late. This field will not exist anymore. We are living in an apocalyptic atmosphere, and it can be because of the news. The way to raise our awareness. So I think they said in this report that almost 60% that they surveyed, 60% of youth surveyed by the APA say they are extremely worried about climate change, and 50% say that they feel sad, anxious, angry, helpless. So it can also be because of the climate change phenomenon itself. In this report, I read that a 23 years old woman from Philippines was declared chronic nightmares about drawing in her bedroom after multiple typhoons and flood in our country. So it's really how people feel is really important, and how the youth feel is really important about it, because maybe the older generation will see it as something really apocalyptic coming, but for us, it's really our future is now. And it's very important, I think, to take into account this, the feeling part of the youth, and build, maybe create spaces for them to express. So you have different ways to do that. You have ambassadors program. I was part of the Island Innovation 2021. I have a friend that was part of the UNDP on natural disaster. You have OECS Sustainable Development Summit too. So it's really a way to take the voice, to create space for youth people, for young people, and give them the opportunity to talk about it. We are the youth movement of Coreca, so my association, we're invited to be part of a climate college workshop in Guadeloupe. So it's a worldwide initiative created by the Association of Cedric Regenbach. I don't know if I pronounced his name properly, but it was to raise awareness about climate change by making connections between climate change causes, climate change consequences, and action to mitigate and adapt. So in 3 years, 1 million of persons were participating to those workshops and had been educated. So it's really, you take some pictures and we work together, we put on the wall things, we stick, and we talk about our feelings and how we live things. And I think it's really important to create those spaces to express ourselves. And it's a space also where new ideas, where innovation has all its space.
I think that's really, really important in terms of creating those spaces, and definitely youth-led spaces are also really important in terms of crafting our own narrative and charting our own future. Design, let me bring you in here as well. What are you seeing on the ground? You have the I guess the privilege of being both a reporter and a spokesperson. What do you think about youth-led spaces and youth creating their own spaces in the Caribbean and the future for that?
Yeah, I mean, my experience with the Caribbean Youth Environment Network, it really opened up my eyes, and I was really always so proud to see young people actually trying to get spaces, right? Trying to make spaces and trying to create opportunities for other young people to share their experiences and so on. And right now, that's why I'm actually really happy about where I'm based right now, career-wise, because at Climate Tracker, we believe in the power of journalism, but more importantly, we recognize that many young journalists don't have the training, the resources, or the support to identify and tell climate stories. And we also recognize that challenge is often greatest in the countries that are hardest hit by climate change, right? So, as you know, within this space now, I'm just so happy to be able to work with journalists and climate communicators from across the, what is called the Global South, and help them to get training, help them to get mentoring, and help them to get opportunities to publish and to write and to create, even using new media and video and photography and everything, to get those stories out there, stories that are not usually typically seen, or stories that don't typically make it into the mainstream media, so that's what I'm just really proud about. And the fact that even, for instance, right now at COP26, I'm happy to say that we have 2 Caribbean people on our team. We have a team of 31 young journalists from across the developing world at the negotiations, and 2 of them are from the Caribbean. One is from Trinidad and one is from Guyana, and I'm just really happy that that I just want to know, I just want to see that continuing, where young people are given the opportunities and young people feel empowered enough to take the opportunities and put that narrative out there about what is happening in the Caribbean with regards to climate change.
Thank you for that. So we actually have a question from the audience that we're going to take, because we are in our we're within the last 5 minutes of this program. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're going to take this last question, and then I'm going to come to everybody for their final sentence. Just one sentence that they want to leave with everyone as it relates to youth engagement as it pertains to climate change. The question is being posed to posting this one to Dr. Ronald Rueanna, how to make sectors as agriculture more resilient in the Caribbean when they are regularly impacted by climate change effects each year. Yeah.
I think I got it. It's basically, how do we increase the resilience of the agricultural sector, right?
Yeah. When it gets hit by climate change, it impacts every year. Yeah.
And the issue with that is that we end up, because of our financial situation and so on, we end up managing crisis. We are in cycles of crisis management rather than risk management. The fact that we have not built our resilience is because we have not invested enough in terms of risk management. So there are techniques that you can utilize in terms of management and adaptation techniques. You know, in terms of flooding, you could have different drainage schemes, irrigation schemes to deal with drought. You could plant different types of crops. You could plant in different places. You need to understand the dynamics of your environment in terms of the soil type, etc. And it's more about being in harmony with what you are producing and understanding that certain things you just cannot. Like flood was a good thing. Back in the days when you have a floodplain being flooded out, it brought all the nutrients down. What has happened over time is our development and where we would have settled and where we decide to use for agriculture, because of competing land uses, may have created a problem. So it's really about understanding where we are. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. So we're going to take just one sentence from everybody in terms of what do you want to leave, what thoughts you want to leave with the audience today about this question of youth education, youth engagement as it pertains to climate change. Just one sentence. I'm going to start with Marie, then I'm going to go to Dezan, then I'm going to go to Michael, then we're going to come back to Dr. Rueanna Haynes, just for your one last sentence. And so I'm going to start with Marie. What is that one last sentiment that you want to leave with everyone?
Maybe I want to tell the youth, I know how hard it is sometimes to renounce to comfort, as there is a contrast between what is promoting in nowadays way of life, travel a lot, more powerful phones and more powerful cars. And so that contrast between this and between what is going to be discussed in Glasgow about lower gas emissions, circular economy, more sustainable consumption, travel less, try to be ecological and energetical transition. I know it is art, but we need to get involved now. It is happening now, and this is about this is dealing with our future. This is us. This is our professional career. This is our daily comfort. So please get involved.
Excellent. Your sentence, Dezan?
I'll try to keep it in one sentence, but I just want to stress the point that climate communication is critical for it's a critical part of youth education and climate action, right? Because on the surface, climate action is about educating, informing, warning, persuading, mobilizing, right? But it goes so much deeper than that when you start to include things like the different experiences and mental and cultural models and the underlying worldviews and this sort of thing. So I just want to encourage Caribbean young people to really get involved in it. And I really want that narrative out there to be more reflective of what is happening in the Caribbean.
Michael?
Yeah, I would say that resistance and revolution are never guaranteed success. But without resistance, there is no chance of success. So we have to try whatever we can do.
Excellent. And Ronald, any last word?
For me, I just think youth should understand that they are the solution. Everything lies in your hands going forward, and there's an immense amount of responsibility on the youth. And I don't think we can change the old fogies in terms of their mentality and thinking and so on. So what we need to do as persons here is to focus on having youth understand what sustainable development is and why it is important for them to contribute towards it.
Excellent. So with that, we want to thank all of our panelists for coming out today. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, the audience, for just being amazing and really engaging with us. We want to encourage you to, engage with us even further. There's a 15-minute audience. There's a 15 minutes post show in which you can continue this conversation. So stay tuned for that. Link us in the chat if you want to take part. And also thanks to our sponsors, thanks to Film TT, thanks to the lead sponsor, which is National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And thank you also to our supporting sponsor, Solid Waste Management Company of Trinidad and Tobago, that's Swimcall, and also, of course, to our media partner, Loop. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.